All right. Well, welcome everyone. It looks like we have about 50 people logged on, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have two presentations scheduled today on outgoing subawards and signatory authority and compliance. Before we begin, though, we have some general announcements from CoRA. The first announcement is we are looking for new members for the CoRA Steering Committee. The terms are generally 6 months, and you'll help plan and run the CoRA meetings, just like I'm doing here now. I know for myself personally, it's been a really great opportunity to meet people that I wouldn't otherwise interact with. And I've also learned a lot from being part of this committee. So I would really recommend it. I think I'm going to go ahead and stay on for another 6-month term because I've really enjoyed it. But if you're interested, please feel free to chat us in this Zoom chat. You can reach out to Christine or myself or Crystal, she's a member, or Eileen Trainham, and let us know. You could also respond to any of our agenda emails for these meetings, but we would love to hear from you. And the second announcement is we are canceling the July meeting just due to vacations and things of that nature. So our next CoRA meeting is going to be back in August. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone there. So this is now the time of the meeting that we like to take a moment and allow any new members here a moment to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group. So I'll give you a second. Do we have any new members? All right. Well, it looks like everyone here has been here before, so we can go ahead and get started. Our first presenter we're very excited to welcome back is Simon Butcher, the outgoing subawards manager for the Office of Sponsored Programs. And he is going to present today on best practices for processing outgoing subawards and how his team is handling subawards that have been impacted by recent changes. So I'd like everyone to welcome Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. And yeah, thanks to Christine and Erin and the CoRA crew for letting me jump on the agenda. I just have one slide with a few different announcements, reminders, kind of comments that I wanted to share. And that'll be the first part of what I think will just be a relatively brief presentation. And then the second part, yeah, as Erin said, we wanted to kind of give a quick update on how, the changing research administration landscape and all the different things that have come through the last few months have impacted outgoing subawards. And so I don't have any kind of slide or presentation materials for that part because it's all kind of changing so much on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But yeah, I just wanted to start with a few updates. So I'll share my screen. Okay. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, comments, I'll try and spot those, or we pause for a second between the two sections. Yeah, so the main thing I really wanted to highlight today is, and I guess, can you see the slide, Erin? Yeah, great. So, it's always the case that it's really important to keep active with our subawards, make sure to get extended and set up in a timely fashion. But something we've realized over the last few months is things unfortunately have taken a turn on the grant side, is that it's even more important right now that any subaward that needs to be active is in place. When we do get terminations that come through or just delays with payments, delays with issuing notice of awards, when we don't have the subaward executed and then suddenly we've got to take some kind of action to close things out or to adjust it, it puts us in a bad position if that prior period or even the agreement itself isn't in place. Kind of best case scenario is it just means we rush things to get the agreement updated and in place and active. Worst case scenario is maybe that, left costs that could have been billed on the table if the subaward was never fully executed. And there's a large variety of reasons why an agreement might not be executed when it needs to be. The one I'm kind of focusing on at the moment is ones where maybe the request didn't come through to us in a timely fashion. Obviously, this is one of those cases where no doubt I'm preaching to the choir, the people that attend these CoRA meetings, that are people that are typically sending things through to us as they need to be. But you can help spread the word to colleagues, share this flyer, which I'll pass on to Christine with your departments and your colleagues. Yeah, just to kind of really encourage everybody to take a look at their awards, their sub awards, and see, are we in a budget period, 6 months into a budget period, and we haven't got that sub award extended for one of our collaborators at another institution, and then see if we can get that resolved. Same with new sub awards too. And if there's a reason that maybe a new subaward hasn't been requested yet and we haven't started working on it, we can help, the subaward team, my team can look at those and see maybe you're just not getting the information you need from a subrecipient. Maybe there's something in the works that we can help look into and get resolved, or at least start doing some work on the front, on the back end, the front end, whichever way you want to look at it. So that when we do get those items resolved, we'll be in a good place to move forward with execution. So that's one half of my request, is if people out there can take a look at their portfolios and help. I think it's a relatively small number, and that kind of transitions into the other comment there on the slide about what's upcoming, the expired agreement review. We've started to do some work in the past, and I think I've mentioned it in various forums, using the different reports available to us in Huron to take a look and try and identify subaward agreements that have maybe slipped through the cracks. And again, like I say, we're in a significant way into a budget period, and for one reason or another, we haven't got that amendment in place yet. And so that's something we're starting to do. And some people may start to receive emails this month to really help identify some of those agreements. We can only know some of the details, and so it's a collaboration, right? If we email you and say, it looks like this agreement should have been extended, but it wasn't, don't get angry with us. We're just trying to start a dialogue, a discourse. You probably know some details that we don't about the project, and maybe it's not needed anymore, or maybe there's some extenuating circumstances for that. But again, knowing that will help. And again, we just, especially right now, we want to make sure we're as up to date as we can on all the outgoing sub awards. So that's something to kind of be coming through in the next few weeks. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight again today some of the main areas that we sort of slow things down in the process, the things that are wrong or maybe not fully addressed in subaward requests that we receive. Because, as everybody probably knows, we're dependent on the field, we're dependent on departments to submit requests to us, and we can only, kind of base what we do on some of the information that we receive. And so let me just move that out of the way. So again, these are the kind of usual suspects, but just for anybody that happens to be new on the call, or people that don't interact with outgoing subs too often, some of the main 4 bullet points that I wanted to highlight today. So making sure that there's funding in Workday in the correct categories. This should be kind of happening by default, but sometimes projects can change over time. And then when we come to actually fund a subaward grant line, it turns out there's not enough money in the category that needs to be in. And so you can check that as you're preparing a subaward request, or if you know that's going to be the case, reach out, let us know. You can just provide the guidance to us, in your request, and that sometimes will be sufficient for us to then go ahead and do the funding. If you can do it in the system, or, if the financial people within the departments or the grant administrators can do that, that's great too. But just providing that context to us can help. Oh yeah, same thing with especially right now when there's been a lot of turnover at different institutions. If you have updated contact details, now more than ever, knowing the correct person to reach out to is going to help save a lot of time. Once upon a time, perhaps if we email somebody and it turned out to be the wrong contact, and we lose 2 weeks, maybe it's not the end of the world. But if we can avoid those 2 weeks, especially at the moment, that would be great. So before you submit a request or as you're preparing it in Huron, just double check that the contact that's listed there is still the right person that we should be reaching out to at the subrecipient institution. Again, kind of the compliance piece is always a confusing element for everybody involved. And that was, I think, maybe the last time I joined the CoRA call was the subject matter at that time of human subject research, animals, data sharing, and all that good stuff. I think we've seen some encouraging advancements in that. Like people have actually been submitting more information to us in that field, so that helps. And I'm very grateful for that. But certainly, it's an area that is one of the main things that will lead to extra back and forth between all the different parties about trying to get that resolved when we don't have the information up front and we start down perhaps a bit of a rabbit hole. And then, of course, all the ancillary reviews, I think there'll be people out there I fully appreciate, trying to get a PI not to hit the submit button is, well, actually, we can look forward to perhaps the next Huron update to correct some of that stuff for us. But certainly we understand that happens and we can work around that. But if it's not going through the right department or school level approvals, that can confuse things with what's quite ready to be worked on. So yeah, that's kind of my announcement or request there for just continued support from you guys on that would be appreciated. And I guess, yeah, sorry, one of the main things I wanted to announce as well was that we're really happy to provide trainings at this time. Myself or any member of my team can meet with new people or one-on-one. We're happy to meet in small group settings too, from if there's a new influx in departments, or again just people who'd like a refresher to walk through the process a few times if it's new to you. So reach out to us. We're going to be reaching out to departments and schools to try and set up bigger sessions to go over some of these processes, particularly perhaps when the next updates to Huron take place. But in the meantime, definitely reach out if you'd like to sit down with somebody and kind of go through the processes for requesting and updating subawards. Yeah, let me pause there just to see if I stop sharing, maybe I'll be able to see the chat. Okay, that's good. So yeah, any questions from anybody at this time? Great. So the other thing I just wanted to share with everybody, and I'll try and keep this bit brief. The main ways that we've been impacted on the subaward team, or outgoing subawards at UVA, should I say, have been impacted by all the developments over the last few months. And there's two areas really, as I see it. One is obviously terminations to grants that then filter down into subawards. And then the other side is a more recent development, but I guess we've been living with that now for over a month, which is the NIH policy change to how they handle foreign subawards. Those are the two main ways that outgoing subawards I feel like have been impacted. Lots of little other developments and things that trickle through, but those are the two for us. And so to start with the terminations, just to give you an idea of our process, some of you will have experienced it and be familiar with it. Some of you fortunately won't have, but you might be interested to know anyway. So, and I feel like at this stage now we're pretty OSP as a whole pre-award, and we've all got this process kind of down now. And so what that looks like is we will receive a termination notice, and we ideally get out a notification to every subawardee, every subrecipient the same day. Typically they come in overnight or in the early morning, and so we're able to get those the notices that the award is being terminated out to subrecipients. We can communicate that fact to them and issue a stop work order if needed. But we don't go ahead and instantly terminate, because by just sending a notification out to the subrecipients up front allows us to get that out a lot quicker, notify them. Everyone is, so far, most institutions are approaching this in a collaborative way, and so they appreciate the kind of informal official notification. Allows them to start preparing things on their end the same way that we do as soon as we receive it. So we get that notification out, and then we follow up within a few days, typically within a week, with an actual termination amendment. Bilateral amendment just to make sure everybody signs, even though legally we don't really necessarily always have to do that. We prefer to take the bilateral approach because then everybody's kind of on the same page. At first, we were trying to wait to see what the impact of appeals might have before we would go ahead and just terminate subawards. But we realized that the termination timeline can be quite long. Sorry, the appeal timeline can be quite long. So we there's just one slide for this. Sorry, I'm not I didn't have any other slides. And so because the appeal timeline can be quite long, we just go ahead and terminate the subawards to aid with closeout, and if we need to reactivate it, if the good news comes through that an appeal is successful, we can go ahead and do that. And then post-award colleagues are able to go ahead and coordinate final invoices and things like that. So yeah, really quite a straightforward and small piece of the process, but the timing is important, getting all those terminations shared out and then the invoicing piece finalized. This is on the NIH foreign subaward side. If you guys have been, anybody that's encountered it will know there's a lot of uncertainty, not a lot of guidance coming through. But on May 1st, NIH changed their policy on foreign subawards and basically said moving forward, starting with any new budget period, we're no longer going to be allowing foreign subawards on our grants, and so you have to find a way to rescope, change your project, figure it out so that you can remove that foreign subaward element but keep things going. We did a lot of communication upfront within the central office, reaching out to PIs, schools, subrecipients themselves. More recently now, kind of the communication has switched a little bit. School of Medicine is the school that's most impacted by this, and so they're working closely with a lot of their PIs to work through the requests as they come from the different institutes at NIH. The takeaway is there's been a lot of inconsistency. The different institutes, the program officers weren't provided a lot of guidance, and so they haven't been able to provide a lot of guidance to our PIs and to us. And what it has is sometimes they've had taken different approaches and been a little inconsistent in what they tell us. But we're working through that with the different PIs as they come to submit their RPPRs and then move into their next budget periods to find ways to continue the projects and kind of remove those foreign subawards out. And then we're expecting, hopeful, there's maybe some more information coming from NIH this month. So maybe we'll have more, details to share with the community in later in the summer. But the NIH's goal is that by September they'll have a new process in place to continue allowing collaborations with foreign entities, but not through the subaward mechanism, but by NIH giving them direct subawards. So we're all kind of waiting to see what happens there and what that will look like and what it will mean longer term for not just foreign subawards, but domestic subawards too. I'm sure most of that is not new to you guys, but unfortunately, until NIH gives some more information, it's all kind of case by case basis at the moment with the impacted, either impacted active awards or impacted proposals and kind of pending awards. Everyone's impacted in some sort of way. So I think that's the main thing I wanted to share. Like I said, I appreciate the time. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or if there's any comments I can address, expand on.
Thank you. And if you have a question, please go ahead and unmute yourself. I think that's very helpful though, Simon, and I appreciate rehearing it as someone who's sometimes doesn't submit her subawards in the most timely fashion, but I'm trying to get better. So, I appreciate
I appreciate
I appreciate your team's help. And just these reminders. So thank you very much for
Well, thank
helping
you.
presenting today. Our next speakers are Gary Nemax, the Assistant Vice President for Compliance, and Steve Sherman, Manager of the University Compliance Program, and they'll be speaking on signatory authority, conflict of interest, and the compliance network and hotline. So let's welcome Gary and Steve.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Steve's getting the slides up for us and will be driving for us today. But yeah, so Steve and I are the Institutional Compliance Office. We've been working together for almost 19 years in a couple of different roles. But what we'd like to do today is cover a few topics of interest. I think from a compliance perspective. We'll on the next slide, we've got an agenda listed, and we're going to start with an overview of sort of who we are and what we do. Steve will talk a bit more about the compliance helpline. And then I'll talk about signatory authority, which we've also discussed at a couple of other recent meetings, so that could be a duplicate for you. So you'll be really good at signatory authority if that's the case. And then as time permits, we'll cover some other compliance related initiatives. But next slide, we'll talk about our compliance program in general and the compliance office. So first, a bit about who we are and what we do. I oversee institutional compliance activities and programs, which means we work with a lot of different departments on ground related to the various compliance requirements that we have. We administer the compliance helpline, which is a way to report any compliance-related concerns and manage signatory authority. And then we also interact regularly with our committee of the Board of Visitors, which is the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee. And at the bottom of the slide, there's a link to our website with more information. We'll share these slides with Christine afterward, but Steve linked a number of websites, so you'll be able to click right on them if you want more information. This org chart shows where we fit into the organization. So our office reports to audit, I report to the Chief Audit Executive, Carolyn Saint. And so you may hear us referred to as Audit and Compliance as a team. We're located together in Carruthers. Carolyn, in turn, reports directly to the Board of Visitors through the chair of the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee. So I have direct access to the board, both through my reporting chain, through Carolyn, but also, as we've shown by the dotted line, I certainly have the ability to go directly to the chair of the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee to report significant compliance deficiencies that they might need to be aware of. And then also, as part of my job, I chair the Compliance Network, which is a committee with representatives from many different departments around the university. We've got a representative sample here in the slide. So it's not everybody, but we wanted to give you a sense of the many different kinds of compliance topics we might work on a given day, which is actually one of the things I like most about my job, is that variety. So most of these individuals do not report directly to me. By design, they report up to the senior leadership in their respective areas. But two I'll highlight that do report to me. One is records and information management. And I think many of you know Caroline Walters and her team and have probably worked with them on records retention and destruction. You may not, the other area is privacy, and you may not know Meredith Mays-Espino, our new director of privacy programs, but she's working on the many ways in which the university works with data and needs to think about the privacy of that data, what we're telling people we're collecting information for, and what we're doing with it. So I think both Caroline and Meredith would be happy to meet with you separately, or they might be a good future speaker for a meeting like this. On the next slide, we talk more about the compliance network and what it is really. So again, it consists of the subject matter experts who help us comply with the federal, state, and other regulatory compliance requirements that we have. So things like the NCAA is a regulatory compliance requirement, not federal or state. But we meet regularly to keep each other up to date on new compliance requirements and policies. We can preview training or policies to each other. And we thought it would be worth highlighting some of the research representation that we have on the committee. They're listed there from the VPR's office, from OSP, and environmental health and safety, and the other areas that that focus on research compliance. So they're an important component of what we do. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve, who'll talk more about our compliance helpline.
Thanks, Gary. So as Gary mentioned, one of our duties is to administer the compliance helpline. And in case you've never heard of that before today, it's our reporting portal through which the university community can submit concerns about violations of laws, regulations, or policies. And just starting with a high-level comment about reporting in general. We could talk for hours about why it's important for UVA to have a healthy reporting culture. But for today, let me just highlight: if you see something, say something. The old adage. You could say something to your supervisor. You could pick up the phone and call your friendly compliance guys. You could report it to the compliance helpline or any other reporting platform. Just make sure you say something. All right, so there are two main ways of reporting through the compliance helpline. One is an 800 number, staffed 24/7 by an independent third party. And the other is a web intake form, which you can find at report.virginia.edu. One important thing worth emphasizing is that both channels allow for anonymous reporting. We can circle back to that in a moment. So if you find your way to report.virginia.edu, this is more or less what you'll see. This is a kind of a compilation of screenshots, but you'll see the compliance helpline featured. If you click on that orange button, it'll take you to our web intake form where you can submit your concerns, attach any relevant documents or photos, etc. On that same web page, we've also consolidated all other reporting portals. I expect you've heard a lot of these, such as Just Report It, Respect at UVA, Reported Barrier, and others. There are also links to several research-related reporting pages as well, like research integrity or foreign influence or lab safety. So if you come to this page and you know exactly where you want to report your incident or your concern, you can find a helpful link on this page. And if you don't know for sure, you're welcome to just simply report it to the compliance helpline and we'll get it to the right place. So just in case you're curious about what the right place is, this slide shows some examples of some concerns that are addressed by different departments. For example, we work on violations of laws, regulations, and policies, allegations of fraud, and other things. Separately, reports involving sexual harassment and discrimination and others would go to Just Report It. Workplace bullying ends up with Respect At, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't need to memorize this slide about where everything should go for two main reasons. One is if you're on report.virginia.edu and you hover over those blue buttons, it'll tell you more about the type of concerns that should go to each portal. And the other reason you don't need to memorize this slide is that if you support through most of our reporting portals at UVA, they will funnel into a single incident management system, which we call SafeGrounds. So there's a lot going on here, but really the key point is just to illustrate that within the SafeGrounds system, no matter where your report comes in, one, we can get it to the right office as needed. We can collaborate with those offices on an investigation if appropriate. And also we can hopefully resolve those concerns and report them out. So by the way, worth mentioning that Gary and I did an entire presentation last year at our national compliance conference. And the whole hour boiled down to this one slide. So again, there's a lot going on here. I don't expect you to be interested in how the sausage gets made, but let me just pause for a moment. Any questions about the compliance helpline, what we've kind of put together here? Great. I'm sure you're holding your questions for the end. So one last slide about the compliance helpline from a slightly different angle. Since this is a research crowd, we just wanted to point out that there are several research-related web pages and areas that rely on the compliance helpline, particularly the anonymous reporting function that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. Anyway, so you can see on these web pages, they research as an enterprise does sometimes, especially for anonymous reports, funnel through the compliance helpline, and then we once again work with the right office. But so that is it on the compliance helpline. And let me pause before sending it back to Gary. Any questions on that? Great, hearing none. Gary, take it away with signatory authority.
Okay, and actually one thing that may be relevant to some of you, especially if you're in the School of Medicine or the School of Nursing, it's worth noting that we share this compliance helpline with the medical center. We work very well with our compliance counterparts in the Compliance and Privacy Office in the medical center. So it's the same form, the same 800 number, and that's the first question you'll be asked is whether this is an academic division or medical center issue. And if you don't know, just give it your best shot, and we talk regularly, and we can work on things together or reassign them as well. But okay, with signatory authority, first we wanted to start by talking about the Board of Visitors policy, and the next chart kind of shows how these two policies interact and where they originate. But the board's policy outlines at a really high level who can commit the university in a contract. So what it says is that both the president and the executive vice president and COO, who's J.J. Davis, may sign anything and everything. Even their authority has some limits. Under certain circumstances, they obtain either advance approval from the board or they tell them after the fact what they've signed. But for the most part, they can sign anything. The Board of Visitors is interested in, or has to approve in advance any contract in which the university will spend more than $5 million in any one year. We get pre-approvals for construction and real estate kinds of transactions, but those are the main things. That policy goes on to describe the delegation that JJ can issue to other people, and that is what we cover in the other policy, that FIN 036. And we'll be talking about that one today. It outlines more specifically how we operationalize the board's policy and what that means for all of you. So on the next slide, we have a link to the signatory authority policy. The main objectives of that policy are listed here, and I won't read them to you. The main points are that the contract gets reviewed and signed by someone with the appropriate signatory authority, that we follow all the federal and state laws and other requirements that we have when we're signing them, and that before signing it, that person makes sure that we've gotten all the necessary internal approvals. So there's a bit of education and knowledge of the university that's required before you would get that authority. And any signatory authority that's delegated comes in the form of a letter from JJ. It's not a delegation to sign anything you want, but rather it would specify the exact types of contracts that you're permitted to sign. There may be a dollar limit associated with it or other limitations. This policy is currently with the Policy Review Committee because we've recommended a few edits to answer some frequently asked questions that we've heard about the policy to improve consistency with other policies and just make sure that we codify our current practices. So an updated version of this policy will be released soon. Let's see, on the next slide, I think it's important to think about, well, what is a contract? And we've got the policy definition on this slide, and really more of a legal definition. It's any agreement between the university and a separate legal entity, another third party, to either make a purchase, receive a grant, perform services. They perform services, we perform services. Maybe one of us is paying the other, maybe not. But it's this in exchange for this legal term known as consideration, where there's an offer, some consideration and acceptance of an offer, and we both sign it. So I think the important point here that we're going to elaborate on in the policy in the new version is that documents that meet this definition might be referred to as other terms. So we often get the question, well, I know I can't sign contracts, but this is an MOU, so I guess I can sign that, right? And the answer is no. If the MOU is between the university and another separate legal entity, it's still a contract. You can call it any of these. We've thrown out a few common examples of what you might call it, but it needs to be signed by someone who's been delegated that authority by JJ. Okay. On the next slide, we talk more about what is a separate legal entity. That seems like it should be a fairly straightforward distinction, but we've included some examples where that's not exactly the case. So our legal name as an institution is the Rector and Visitors of the University of Virginia. That includes both the Medical Center and the College at Wise. We're one legal entity. We're 3 state agencies. It's a little complicated. But note that there are other organizations that we deal with regularly that are not part of the Rector and Visitors of the University of Virginia. They're actually separate legal entities. And we've highlighted a few at the beginning that tend to confuse people. One is our university-associated organizations, also referred to as university-related foundations, or UAOs. So organizations like UPG, the University Physicians Group, the Licensing and Ventures Group, Alumni Association. There's a list of all of these UAOs on the finance website, but those are separate legal entities, as is community health. So someone who signs a contract with those entities needs to have delegated signatory authority. The other group that we get questions about are our student organizations. So our contracted independent organizations, or CIOs, and also fraternities and sororities, they are separate legal entities. We have contracts with them that add them to the list of student groups. And I think the rest of them are pretty straightforward. I mean, we would all consider vendors, grant sponsors, municipalities like the city and county to be separate legal entities, but we're listing them all there. So that's the key point, that any agreement between the university and a separate legal entity has to be signed by someone with signatory authority. And then finally, where it's not required is if there's some document that is being signed between schools or departments within the university, like an ITS service level agreement, like a work order with facilities management, something that's within the legal entity of the Rector and Visitors of the University of Virginia. That does not need to go to someone with delegated signatory authority. That's really up to your department or school to determine who is permitted to sign those. But again, as long as both parties are within UVA, you're fine. Okay, the next slide. Yeah, okay, thanks. So every policy includes a compliance with policy section. And what this particular policy says is that if an unauthorized person signs a contract, someone who doesn't have signatory authority, the university might declare that contract void, and just that the person who committed us didn't have the authority to do so. And we just consider it completely void. The individual who signed it may be held personally liable for payment or the performance of services, depending on the incident and the particular terms and conditions of that contract. And then finally, the employee could face disciplinary action up to and including termination if they're signing something that they don't have the authority to sign. So those are a few pretty good reasons not to sign things. And as we mentioned, we've got a list of people who are able to sign certain kinds of documents. But let's see, on the next slide, who does have authority to sign contracts on behalf of the university? I've told you a lot of things about what you shouldn't do, but if we're in front of a room full of people, I like to have people call out who can sign things. And I always like to start by saying the most important answer to this question is not you, not your supervisor, not your PI, not your department chair, and really only a handful of deans and vice presidents even have signatory authority. So, so be really careful. The next slide highlights some of the key offices that have been granted signatory authority. Certainly OSP for grants and contracts, and procurement for grants and contracts related to research, procurement for the purchase of goods and services, facilities management handles construction. Also, the office of the chief financial officer, the VP and chief financial officer, would handle other kinds of agreements that don't fall into the OSP or procurement realm. So things like leases or art loan agreements, you might work with Bill Define. Augie or Olga might sign them. And then finally, we've listed the provost's office that handles academic program agreements. So then on the next slide, we've also summarized some of the signatories in the research arena. So both in the Office of the Vice President for Research, and you can see what they're permitted to sign there. Again, reinforcing the point that they don't sign anything and everything. They each have a specific area of expertise that they cover. And then we've got the team in the Office of Sponsored Programs, some who can sign any contracts. And then we've got a shout out there to our newest signatory authority recipient, Simon. So Simon can sign specific types of agreements related to subawards and but not other things. So and then on the next slide, the other thing that we try to think about is how do we prevent people from signing documents that they shouldn't. And so we've been coming to sessions like this. Some of you may be sick of hearing from us because we've been to research administrators meeting, we've been to fiscal administrators, the Finance Advisory Network. It's been suggested we should go to Faculty Senate, so I'll work on that. But we're really trying to get the word out. I feel like we're making the rounds of the late night talk shows, plugging a new movie or something. But we've talked about ways that we could get other communications sent out. But if you have other ideas or a departmental newsletter, if there's a meeting we should attend, please let us know because we really want to get the word out. And all right, if you have questions about signatory authority, just send them our way. And I'll turn it back to Steve to cover a couple of quick other topics that we work on just to make sure you know who to call if these come up.
Indeed, just briefly, a couple of things that we work on that you all might want to interact with. One is the compliance matrix. We maintain a matrix of all legal and regulatory compliance topics and subject matter experts for the academic division, health system, and WISE. So if you ever have a question about a particular regulation, you can either just reach out to us and we'll answer as many questions as we can and get you to the expert if we need to. Or you can go to our website, find the matrix, and find the right person to call directly. So up to you, the matrix. Second, conflicts of interest, and it's a little complicated at UVA. Our office owns the overarching university policy on COI. That's FIN 54, in case anybody's keeping score. And we also work closely with the three areas that direct the three major components of our COI program overall. That's HR, procurement, and research. That's Rob Marriage for the most part there. And that last bullet point is also worth mentioning that COI plays an important role in our code of ethics. And so speaking of our code of ethics, I'm sure you already have this printed out on your desk, but worth revisiting from time to time. Personally, I think it's fair to say that we all of us own the code of ethics, but we're including it here because our office led a group of stakeholders in revising the code, and we bring it to the board of visitors for their approval. By the way, in case you're curious, some universities have like a 50-page code of conduct, glossy booklets that everybody has and doesn't read. We feel strongly that our code of ethics should be high level and aspirational and should be easy to read and should fit more or less on one slide. So anyway, so you're welcome. You can print this out and look at it while you brush your teeth every morning. With that, questions? This is us. You can ask us questions now or just reach out to us at any time. I think Stuart Craig once introduced us as the cheerful compliance guys, and it's kind of stuck a little bit. It's what other people call us around ground. So anyway, any questions? Or Gary, any last comments?
No, every time we talk about this, I usually end up hearing from someone who says, "Uh-oh, I signed something I shouldn't have." So it can be that too.
We'll start with "We forgive you," and then we'll figure out how to make it right.
And
it looks like, oh, sorry.
No, I see we have a question in the chat, actually.
Yes, in the
Yeah.
chat, Tatiana Clark, how frequently do you encounter situations where individuals without signature authorities sign documents? What are the most common reasons this occurs?
Right. Fortunately, it's not super common. Usually where we will discover this is if, certainly if it's a sponsored program, all of a sudden OSP has a request to set up a new project or a new grant. And that's when they find out, or procurement gets an invoice for something that there's no purchase order for. And it's like, where did this come from? Who signed it? So that's usually how we figure it out. I think with a lot of people, it's not a malicious, I'm gonna go, sign a contract to build a new building at UVA. I mean, nobody would do that. But I think you get these documents that seem harmless. You're in a hurry. It's got to be done tomorrow. It doesn't say contract. It says MOU. It says statement of work. It says something that sounds harmless, and you sign it and move on with life, and then it comes back to bite us, and that's sort of how we find out. So we're and sometimes when that happens, we're able just to go to the vendor or the sponsor and say, look, someone else should have signed this. This person signed it on behalf of the department. They don't have the authority to sign on behalf of the rector and visitors of the University of Virginia. We'll add another signature and it's okay. But other times you may have inadvertently agreed to a term, a contractual term that we're prohibited by state law from agreeing to, like indemnification. There's a lot of discussion about governing law and arbitration and things like that. There are all kinds of things that are probably floating in Simon's head that we can't agree to from a research perspective. We get all, and they're changing frequently. Yeah. So it's just knowing that and having that knowledge is really key in signing them. So yeah, if you discover something, let us know and we'll try to help you fix it.
I was going to say, and you brought it up, but I think that speaking to the faculty directly is really critical. I know, speaking for my department, I'm in surgery. Where I see this as being more of a concern is with like consulting agreements and things like that the surgeons have. And I know and I'm sure they've been told this, but I think if there were some, and I might reach out to you separately to ask about maybe coming to like a faculty meeting or something, but just
Absolutely.
the more it can be told to the faculty, I think the better.
Yeah. I mean, please tell them these two guys came to the CoRA meeting.
Yeah.
Can't sign this and blame us. That's fine. But if it would be helpful to come to a meeting, if it would be, we're going to work on some communication once the policy is finalized in a couple of weeks, the updates, so that we can have something written that you could share with your department or point to. But any ideas you have about how to get the word out, I think, like Simon said, when this group gets together, we're often preaching to the choir, right? These are the people who show up and at least care enough to try to do the right thing, and you do the right thing most of the time, but we all make mistakes. It's the other people who aren't even thinking about this that we need to read, and we could use your help in doing that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron. And you can name names or not name names.
I won't.
But it's worth saying that that is a common refrain that we hear, that getting in the heads of faculty that are just inclined to say, oh, I can sign whatever I want, right? It's a tough hurdle to jump over, but yeah, we'll get there with your help.
I'm sure. Yes, I know you will. All right. If we don't have any other questions, I'll give a second if anyone has any other questions for Gary or Steve. Well, thank you, both of you. That was really enlightening. Thank you, Simon, for your presentation today as well. Before we go, I'd just like to throw it to Erica Pretty really quickly. She has an announcement about resources to make, but thank you all for your participation today. It was very educational.
Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to let everybody know, if you're not aware already, that these recordings of these meetings are now posted in a section of the OSP website, and I'll put that link into the chat for everyone. That way, if you want to go look at old ones, we only have a certain number because some of the recordings had expired. So but then we'll go and keep on top of posting each month. Let me share my screen because I'll just draw your attention to one other thing as well while I have a captive audience. So this is the CoRA monthly meeting archive page that I just linked in the chat. And then also just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that there is under resources, OSP communications, there's another page, and this has recordings to the spotlight meeting. So each month that we have a spotlight meeting, there's going to be a recording for that. And then there's a newsletter archive and then a RAF meeting archive for previous RAF meetings that we've had. In addition to that, many of you might have received a communication about the OSP communications newsletter. So the Spotlight newsletter, Stephen had to do sort of a reorg of the listserv that gets sent out to. So if you were previously on it, you got an email asking you to resubscribe to that listserv if you want to continue to get it. And so if you didn't get that email, or if you've never received that email and you want to sign up for it, you come here and I'll put this link in the chat as well. And you hit the sign up for OSP communications, and that signs you up for that monthly newsletter so that you can get all of the timely information, blog posts, etc. And then there's also a link here to the email campaign archive. So you can read the old emails as well from any emails that have gone out to the research administration field using that listserv. So let me put that link in the chat as well. And there you are. So thank you so much.
Perfect. And we'll send out the recording later, as well as the slides from our presenters, and those links should be in that recording with the chat. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. This was a really wonderful meeting. I just want to remind you again, if you'd like to be in the CoRA steering committee, please reach out. And we will not be meeting in July, so we will see you all in August. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Stop recording.